Hi, everyone. My name is Sandy Gutman, and I'm an assistant curator at the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. Thank you so much for joining me and the Guerrilla Girls in conversation this evening as we kick off the next season of Talking to Our Time virtual program series. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to extend my deepest gratitude and acknowledgement to the Nako-Cheng, the Anacostan, and the Piscataway people, whose ancestral land is where we at the Hirshhorn Museum are joining you from this evening. For accessibility purposes, we've provided CART captioning and American Sign Language interpretation. If you're using ASL interpretation, we recommend pinning the interpreter to your view. To do that, put your Zoom window into gallery view, select the ASL interpreter's video, and click the three dots in the upper right corner where you'll see a drop-down to pin the video. If you're viewing through the YouTube or Facebook live streams, CART captioning will be made available. Additionally, a captioned recording of this program will be made available following the recording of this program. In terms of the program structure, after this introduction, I'll be in conversation with the Guerrilla Girls for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then we're going to have time for Q&A at the close of the program. And if you have questions or thoughts that you want to drop in, feel free to do that throughout the program in the Q&A section. And now I have the distinct honor to introduce the Guerrilla Girls. The Guerrilla Girls, also known as the Conscience of the Art World, were founded in 1985 in response to a survey exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Of the 169 artists included in that exhibition, only 13 of those artists were women and only 8 of those artists were of color. Responding to the lack of diversity in that show and a general apathy from the public, the Guerrilla Girls banded together to capture the attention of the public, call out inequity, and enforce accountability from museums and galleries. Donning guerrilla masks and taking pseudonyms of deceased women artists, the Guerrilla Girls took to the streets under the guise of anonymity, unleashing renegade poster campaigns as a means to distribute knowledge. Known for their use of humorous language, research data, and eye-catching graphics, the Guerrilla Girls have created hundreds of posters, billboards, street banners, stickers, and books, as well as large-scale installations and projects that not only critique the art world, but call out Hollywood, politics, and pop culture. In the last 3 decades, their critiques and callouts have traveled the globe, with posters being translated into countless languages and their work being exhibited in galleries, museums, art fairs, and public space all over the world. A little closer to home, in 2008, the Washington Post gave the Guerrilla Girls a full page in a special section of the paper dedicated to feminism in art. They took this as an opportunity to reveal the appallingly low number of women artists and artists of color on view on the National Mall at institutions that used federal funding, taxpayer dollars, including a critique of the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. And in recent years, their works were included in the Hirshhorn's 2018 exhibition, Brand New Art and Commodity in the 1980s, and our 2019 exhibition, Manifesto, Art and Agency. Their recent publication, Guerrilla Girls, The Art of Behaving Badly, was published in 2020 and was listed in the New York Times as one of the best art books of the year. With over 60 individuals rotating in and out of the collective and 35 years of work across media, the Guerrilla Girls continue to make trouble, inviting and inciting all of us to speak out against inequality near and far. I'm joined tonight by 2 of the founding members of the Guerrilla Girls, Frida Kahlo and Katja Kollwitz, who I'm so eager to talk to. Without further ado, I want to invite Frida and Katja to please turn on your videos. Hello.
Howdy.
Hello, hello, welcome. So this program is called Talking to Our Time, and I thought, what a better time than to talk to people who not only spoke to their time in the 1980s when they were founded, but are currently talking to their time right now. So I'm a little bit curious if we can dive into then and now, how you've grown since your first poster that you put in Chelsea in 1985 and the posters that have followed to where we are today.
Katja?
Oh, well, one really interesting thing that we've realized is we really started out with this new philosophy of how to do political art that might have the power to change people's minds. And we're still working under that paradigm today. Every member, every one of us, we're always trying to push things further and do more effective work. But our other great idea was take it to the streets, because the art world is through, we started out criticizing the art world, as Sandy just said. And the art world is full of gatekeepers. It's all about gatekeepers. And we hate gatekeepers. And they often make the wrong decisions. When we started out, all the decisions were to elevate the work of white men and leave women and everyone of color, women are not, behind. And it was the only way we could really talk to those people. There was no internet or anything then, was to put our message up where you had to see it. It would be in your face.
If I could add something, I think the conscience of the art world has changed. You don't hear curators or critics or museum directors anymore saying stupid things like they said in the 80s, that women and artists of color don't make work that addresses the major dialogue of the art world. No one will say that anymore. But there are lots of other issues, income inequality, a glass ceiling for women and artists of color. They don't get the same kind of financing and resources. And most of the power and the wealth in the art world is distributed still between white men. So 3 steps forward and a couple more to go.
And in terms of your, you've been working, as I said, in posters, and then you kind of branched out from posters. You've done stickers, you've done billboards. What is it that led you to go from the original posters in 1985 that you were putting up in the middle of the night to expand? Like, how has your practice grown over 3 decades?
Well, our practice grew with technology. I mean, we did these relatively small black and white posters because that's all we could afford. We would pass the hat around, to pay for printing. Today, you can do a 50-foot billboard. You can do a giant installation in any institution, all done with digital printing, which is kind of our wheelhouse anyway. So as soon as that was possible, we started doing things bigger and bigger. It was still hard to afford them, but then we kind of lucked out, and all these street places all over the world and institutions like the Hirshhorn and others wanted us to come and show this other side of how to critique culture that wasn't in the museum so much. It is now. I mean, it's trying to be now. This is a time when we all want to change the museum. But we had an opportunity to go in there so that when you're looking at what you're used to seeing on the world, on the walls, what is important art, you can also see this critique of the system.
Can you talk a little bit more about that process? It's kind of a big leap to go from truly being outsiders, working on literal outside of buildings to then, and institutions really, to then being invited inside, welcomed inside. I recall reading an interview or hearing a talk that you did where you talked about it being a bit of a dilemma to be going from outside to inside, and the process to be, grappling with having that kind of access, but also that kind of audience and that kind of opportunity.
Well, it is difficult. Probably the first big invitation we got was in 2005 when we participated in the Venice Biennale. And it was the first Biennale that was ever organized by 2 female directors. And big surprise, it had the largest number of women ever in the show. And when we were asked by Rosa Martinez, she said, "Frida, make us some trouble." The directors realized that there was a lot of institutional bias inside the biennial, and they really wanted us to come in and make a little bit of trouble. And I do believe that that's the situation in a lot of institutions. There are a lot of well-intentioned people inside institutions trying really hard to change them. And why shouldn't we take advantage of their large audience? Now, every invitation is a little bit different and under different circumstances. So we have to weigh each one and make sure that our voice is really being heard. We're not being exploited. We're not being tokenized. And that we're actually able to criticize the institution itself, and that's always important.
But you know what we don't have trouble doing, that's absolutely right, Frida, and that's crucial. What we've never had trouble doing is reaching and empowering the audience, because we get all these messages from people, just ordinary people going into museums when our work is up saying, I didn't know this before. And part of that is just art education in this country is so horrible that artists, that kids are more taught art is about beauty. Not that art is part of its time. All art is political, even if your idea is to do something, you know, beautiful. It's all based on situations in culture. And we've always wanted to be a part of showing that other side, you know, how the underpinnings work, what it's all like, and how it usually works to exclude people, not have a big tent and bring everybody in.
I'm curious if you've had any negative responses from institutions, speaking as a representative of an institution who's working with you, where you say for the Venice Biennale, you come up with all this amazing research, you make these incredible points, you educate the public. Has there ever been any pushback from an institution saying, actually, we're not sure we want you to go that far?
Well, a couple of years ago, we were invited by the Asia Archive to do an exhibition outside Art Basel Hong Kong. And Art Basel Hong Kong is glittering, and I mean, just a ton of money being thrown around at art stars. Anyway, what we decided to do was to look at the history of the Art Basel Hong Kong, and to analyze it in terms of diversity, and to do a little exhibit just outside the entrance to the fair. And we had lots of information about art schools in Hong Kong, the last iteration of Art Basel Hong Kong, and it was pretty damning. And the director of Art Basel Hong Kong came through and saw it and was furious. And the director who invited us said, well, this is information that we got from you, from your website. And he said, you shouldn't believe our information. It wasn't correct.
We've also had some curators get fired later, so watch out, Sandra.
Oh my God, thank you for the warning.
Also, I wonder if we could see that we have some pictures of stuff. Maybe we could try out like actually looking at a picture, which would be like Hong Kong starts like 44, 43, 44, 45. We could just go through them if it doesn't take too long. Otherwise, we can move on.
Yeah, also related to the Art Basel Hong Kong, you also brought in the audience. You invited them to respond you created these worksheets, I believe, that were sort of surveys or tallies that people could do as they went through the exhibition. Could you talk about why you chose to invite the audience, and in other projects, why you choose to hear from the public?
Wait, Frida, let's go to the next slide, and then Frida will also talk about the slide after that. You'll hear her do it. Okay.
Great.
Well, these are the stickums that we sort of gave to people coming to the exhibition. And we asked them to go in and to count the artists, the women and the artists of color in the fair, and then come out and post them on the wall. It's really important to have the audience participate, because we are about empowering people who go to art museums, not necessarily the tastemakers who have the bucks to buy the art. We really think that the audience for art should be empowered as well. And this is the corner. We had this quote from Confucius: if you keep women away, they get resentful. And it was, translated and reproduced in Cantonese. And it was a great, great experience. Chapter, do you have anything you want to say?
Well, yeah. Could we see, let's see, could we see slide 40? We love public participation. Oh, I'm sorry, am I in the wrong one? Wait, hold on, I can't read. Yeah, 40, number 40, the one before that, that one, let's start there. We love public participation, and we especially feel when you're an agitating kind of artist, people have a right to respond positively or negatively, and we want them to have the right to respond, often right in our exhibitions. So this is a project we did. We had a whole lot of work up at Tate Modern. We usually have work up there, but big room of our work. But in another part of Tate Modern a few years ago, we created the first ever Guerrilla Girls complaints department. Could we see the next slide? And people could come and bring things, they could make things there, they could write anything they wanted. Next one, please. About every different subject. You know, there was heavy political stuff, a lot of feminist stuff, a lot of teenage venting, some very poignant experiences we had with people who came particularly to put something up that they'd always been afraid to say out loud. One young woman came up to me and said, "This is what I want to put up, but I don't want to be here when I go public with this." And it was an incredible experience.
We reproduced this in Brazil, and it was really interesting how much response we had. And every time we do this, we keep all of the comments, and they become a kind of time capsule. So somewhere in the bowels of Tate Modern, you can find all of these post-its, all of these statements, all of these complaints. And I'm sure someday it'll be really interesting to social scientists and maybe even art historians to take them out and see what people were complaining about at a certain time and in a certain place.
And you know, we call ourselves creative complainers. And we really think complaining is an important thing to do. And we also think right now, things are so horrible in so many ways, but it's also a golden age of activism. There's so much incredible creativity out there whenever people take to the streets. It's really a moment that that means so much, because this kind of graphic work that people have always done is hugely important in connecting to people, empowering people, and changing the dialogue around issues, and hopefully changing discrimination itself.
Since you've been around for 35 years, do you think that there's actually been any measurable changes? I know you said it's different for a number of reasons. Curators aren't saying that, there's no such thing as good women artists anymore, and the reasons for inclusion or exclusion is sort of a moving target. But have you noticed that there have been any changes to the work that we do?
Well, certainly the consciousness has changed inside museums, but the art world has become more and more an instrument of capitalism. And art has become sort of luxury items to be traded back and forth between rich collectors. And that, that's a really lousy way to write art history. It's really reverting back to the age of kings and queens and emperors, where people with enormous sums of money could dictate the taste of a time. And that was something I don't believe existed in the mid-'80s. And it's increasingly becoming like that. I mean, just today, there's a big revelation about all of the money that Leon Black, who is the chairman of the board of the Museum of Modern Art, passed to Jeffrey Epstein. And I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars for this, for that, whatever. And it was just kind of shocking that, for example, Leon Black gave $40 million to the Museum of Modern Art. He got a room with his name on it. Meanwhile, during the pandemic, they almost closed the education department down because they didn't have the money to pay their salaries. So why couldn't that money be put into the museum in a constructive way to save it as a social institution?
Could we see, as you're talking, Frida, it'd be great to see number 29. By the way, after the disgusting revelations today and yesterday about Leon Black, more and more support of Jeffrey Epstein after he was convicted of sex trafficking in 2009, 8 or 9. It's still, he still is the chair of the board, and MoMA has announced that they are not planning to get rid of him anytime soon. I wonder about that. Anyway, we did this whole piece about Leon Black and another big Jeffrey Epstein supporter on their board, saying advice to the Museum of Modern Art about big donors with big ties to Jeffrey Epstein. MoMA should kick them off the board immediately, drape their galleries in the rooms in the museum in black, and put up wall labels explaining why. And of course, we volunteered to help write those wall labels.
And did you get any sort of response from MoMA? I know that they have not said that they would remove Leon Black from his chair position, but even having this outside of MoMA, I believe it was around the opening weekend after their renovation. Did you hear anything, or was there a public response to this advertisement you placed?
You know,
Well, I
it's
think
our experience whenever we've overtly criticized museums that they tend to just ignore it. And they really respond only when huge groups of people, you know, protest outside the museum. That happened at the Guggenheim, and it happened at the Whitney when we did our first Whitney show. They ignored the show completely, and it was only when a lot of people pressured them. So they would really like all this to go away.
Yeah.
Well, that's part of the problem. They are stuck with needing this money. We don't have, I mean, the Hirshhorn is a government museum, so you have government money, but I'm sure you still do need donor money as well, right?
We do. And I feel like there's like this multi-pronged issue that we're getting into here, right? That's very much tied to capitalism as well as labor rights issues that exist across the art world, from museums to galleries to performing art spaces. And I've been kind of grappling with it as an active participant in this ecosystem, if you will, that we're all kind of a part of, where we get our funding from multiple spaces, whether it's private, corporate, or governmental, and then where that money is coming from, you know, you have to follow it and figure out what is ethical for the institution. And we've been seeing, and I know you've participated or documented some of these movements, these activist movements that have called out very specific institutions for their taking support from kind of nefarious sources, how the money's gotten, whether it's, you know, from for-profit prisons, you know, we have Safariland and you know, tear gas that's been used at the border. And it's something that I'm kind of grappling with, where the money is coming from, but also where is the money going, and who on staff is seeing it, and how can we take care of each other, the artists, the employees, the unpaid employees that we have to take care of as well. And you know, what is sustainable or unsustainable about this system. And I've been thinking about also how you guys, or you as a group, have been circumventing this system of greed, wealth, capitalism, by putting your art either out there completely for free or at very affordable price points. So I wanted to hear your take on, you know, that decision to kind of circumvent that system.
Well, we always wanted to empower people who love art, you know, ordinary people, art students, you know, people for whom, you know, the art is part of their culture. So we decided early on that we would do posters. We would put them on the street. When people wanted copies of them, well, we just reproduce them endlessly. We do billboards, we do stickers, we do all kinds of things that cannot be turned into a precious object that can be owned and controlled, you know, by the person who owns them. And they really don't have the kind of resale value. They don't survive at auctions and all of the standard places where artists' value is determined. We always like to say that we would rather have our posters on every college dormitory room than hanging over the sofa of a super wealthy billionaire art collector like Leon Black. And by that token, we've sort of skipped the commercial part of the art world, and we were sort of welcomed into institutions because our work represents a body of knowledge, and a critical body of knowledge that probably doesn't interest an art collector who wants a work of art to sort of make them look wonderful. And we're thrilled that we're in in museum collections where sometime in the future someone will be looking at, multi-billion-dollar sculptures, and then they'll see our portfolio and say, oh, all this stuff was going on at the same time?
If we have a couple of minutes, it might be a good time to show this film. We did this big sticker campaign about income inequality and billionaires controlling art a few years ago. And I think it's number 7, if we could play that. It just takes a couple of minutes.
That sounds great.
So the world of artists is great, but the art world sucks. The super rich are controlling the museums, sitting on the boards.
Power is being centralized into these few rich people. Like, it's really about the 1%.
Unfortunately, the art world right now appears to be about money and about the production of luxury items.
Billionaires are making more and more and more, and their taste controls which artists get the big bucks and get the opportunities and get the shows. We're planning to sneak around New York with the Illuminator. So we'll be starting out in Chelsea, and we hope to then go to the Whitney. So we had this idea to do something we could do really fast around New York and put these stickers up. Some of the stickers are about art galleries, about billionaires, billionaire collectors, and about museums. So we wanted to put them up where they belong, on the big galleries, on the museums, and give them out to people, especially so they could do the same thing. And it seemed like a great idea. Call people together, just put the word out, see who comes, and just run around the streets and put these things up and bother people.
It's going to be a Saturday in Chelsea. People walking around feeling really good about having seen all this inspiring art, and all of a sudden they're going to see the wall above start talking to them, and it's going to say, "Dear art collector, we completely get collecting art is so expensive. We really understand why you can't afford to pay all your employees a living wage." The wall is going to talk to them. Every time we put something up, people would go bananas. Some people would love it, some people would hate it. So we would sort of work in that space. It's really very productive to provoke people to think about things. And we discovered early on that if you could make someone who disagreed with you laugh, you had a hook inside their brain. Once you were in there, you just might be able to change their minds about things.
That's great. I actually really wanted to hear more about this idea of humor in your work. How did you realize that being humorous or witty or funny, even with really upsetting information that you were putting out into the world, how did you realize that that was working, or that was the best sort of successful tactic for you to take?
Humor is always
Sorry. The Guerrilla Girls were actually formed with the idea to do posters. And our first poster starts out that whole way of twisting an issue around and presenting it differently. And you can't use humor all the time. Sometimes we're just angry, but we always try to get some killer statistics, an in-your-face visual, and something that's irrefutable and hopefully unforgettable. Our most well-known poster, "Do Women Have to Be Naked to Get into the Met Museum?" Well, another group might have done something that said, "There aren't enough women artists in the Metropolitan Museum of Art." And I don't think we'd be here talking to you today, because instead we found a crazy headline do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? And we proved it with statistics. And once you see this poster, I mean, obviously everything we do isn't equally effective, but this one, is really has passed the test of time. We dare anyone who's seen this and let it get into their brain a little bit, ever go to a museum again and not think about what is on the walls and why. And that's what people need to do. We have systemic racism in museums. We have, hugely low number of women and artists of color in the museums. And museums are playing catch up now. So all viewers and all art lovers have to help the museums. They know they're doing the right thing. There are so many people in there who want to, but they need help to make this happen because they're stuck with their old collections.
Mm-hmm. It's also interesting just looking at the image that we have on the screen. It's not just the words and the phrasing that are funny, it's also the visual, right? Like you have this Odalisque by Aang, and then you threw the gorilla mask on it, which like takes it to a completely different place visually, and it becomes sort of unforgettable. And by that, the information also gets stuck into your head. And what's really exciting about this poster to me is that you've actually gone back and recounted it. And I'm really interested in this idea of going back to the museums and galleries, almost like you're giving us the benefit of the doubt to improve or correct. And what makes you want to do that? Or do you have any plans to continue to update some of your most iconic posters?
Well, I think museums should just be wary, and when we could come back and do a count anytime. Sadly, though, when we went back to the Met to do a count again, a Get Naked count, there were fewer women artists, but more naked males. So that's a kind of sad kind of progress. And we did a count once at the same count at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and an art school outside of Boston rented a truck. I think you can see it in the lower right-hand corner, a truck. And the poster went all over the city of Boston. It was this moving advertisement, telling people something about their beloved institution that maybe the institution shouldn't be too proud of. And then it stopped in front of the museum. And there was a great photo op. It went online, and within 10 minutes, the curators wrote to us promising that they were going to do a better job. And we said, well, we're going to watch you. And in fact, they did.
That's amazing. I'm also just curious.
It's a thrill to do something that has a result.
It is. It's like you're holding everyone's feet to the fire, the public's to demand accountability, as well as the institutions to make themselves accountable. In terms of, doing these sort of counts, if you will, I'm a little bit curious about your process. Like, how do you land on a subject or start to gather your data? Is it going in not as Guerrilla Girls and just literally counting the balls? Do you work with collaborators? Do you work with institutions? Is it all of the above?
It's all of the above. I mean, it's been done all those different ways. And yeah, we don't go in masks and count. That would, have too much attention. But we do get invited these days to count and criticize institutions right on their own walls. And an example of that is what Frida just talked about at Boston, to do something about it that appears in front of the museum or inside the museum. I mean, we had a retrospective at the Museum of Art Sao Paulo a few years ago, and they asked us if we would do their own, in Portuguese, version of Naked. And we counted their collection, and of course it came up short. And of course we were invited there by people in the museum who want to and are changing this.
If we could look at number 17, which is an image of the project that we did for the Washington Post in 2008.
I was just going to ask you to bring that up.
We could explain what happened there. We decided to design our own cheap tabloid that would tell the true story of the museums on the Mall. Horror on the National Mall, thousands of women locked in the basements of DC museums. Now this was great because we had the Washington Post both as fact finders and fact checkers. And what they discovered was that at the time this project was done, there was not one single African-American artist on exhibit at the National Gallery. So they called up the National Gallery, said, this is the Washington Post. We're doing fact checking for something we're going to publish tomorrow. And we want to confirm that at this moment, there's not a single African-American artist hanging at the National Gallery of Art. And I mean, the press department just went bananas and said, well, we'll call you back tomorrow morning. And overnight, they decided to install a sculpture by an African-American artist so they could have one artist, African-American artist in the gallery at that time. So it was thrilling in a way to be able to make that change. But on the other hand, it was a form of tokenism, as though if you put one in, the issue is taken care of. I mean, it's a great story to tell, but it's also a very sad story. And I think it would be fun to get the Washington Post to redo it and see if things have changed.
Yeah, we love it.
Can we see the next slide? Because that shows the statistics. I think they're probably readable. The statistics were just terrible. Which museum has the least art by women and artists of color on view? National Gallery of Art, 98% male, 99.9% white. National Portrait Gallery, 93.99. The Hirshhorn, 95% male, 94% white. This is 2006. And the American Museum and Resnick Gallery, 88% male, 91% white. So, the Guerrilla Girls don't complain because there isn't 50% this or 14% this. These are the kind of statistics we're faced with in the art world, or if we look at politics, if we look at many other fields, or the film industry, which we've done a lot of stuff about, that's what we're complaining about. It's pretty irrefutable. I mean, those are not good statistics.
No, but it's also, I think, really important as an institution to come to terms with that number and to try to push ourselves to do better, not just in who we collect, but in who we exhibit, who we program with, and also thinking about our audiences. I think for me as a viewer, when I'm, not wearing my curator hat, I want to see pieces of me and my identity reflected in the program, who's on the wall, but also who's in the gallery too. I want to see, an expansion of who our audiences are and who the artists are that we work for. And, these statistics are incredibly damning, but I also find them thrilling because it shows us exactly what the work is that we need to do. And I just want to roll up my sleeves and get to work and begin to address this.
Great. Go for it.
So I know we have a few more minutes before we get to the Q&A. I was hoping that we could talk a little bit about the sort of activism that's happening both in the art world, but also, the larger activist movements that are happening. And, my first question about your poster and reaching the public kind of ties in very much today because we have social media and there are all of these Instagram accounts, these anonymous Instagram accounts that are emerging, like Change the Museum, where art workers, artists, gallerists, people are coming forward anonymously to, bring up their own issues tied to, many of the things we've discussed today: racism, sexism, misogyny, unfair labor practices. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your thinking on these movements and also what you guys are thinking about today in terms of, upcoming projects or what you want to tackle next.
Well, the art world always wants to think that it's progressive, it's ahead of the curve, it's avant-garde. But if you start to look at it as a social system, it's really derriere. And I'm afraid museums are kind of like that too. Their salaries are really high at the top, very low at the bottom, not much in between. Everyone's always looking for money. I believe the director of the new museum in New York took a 20% salary cut during the pandemic, and she still is earning more than the mayor of New York City or the governor of New York State. So that's a really kind of almost reactionary, environment. And when employees are not unionized, and when they're furloughed so quickly, that really, it's not a progressive atmosphere at all. And a lot of the public doesn't realize that. And all of these, anonymous websites and Instagram accounts are wonderful because they're really getting inside information out to see how much institutional bias, institutional sexism and racism, and how much income inequality exists inside museums. When you think about the space inside museums and you think about them as a social institution, when they close down, why can't they be repurposed for something else? A director of a Danish museum said to us, why don't museums in the United States, why can't they function as temporary shelters when they're closed? Why can't they take on another social, function? But of course, a museum is a kind of sacred space. They would never think to do something like that. But wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah.
But everything that's wrong with the art world is, of course, wrong with society as a whole. And I know we're supposed to feel really, a little optimistic right now because we have had a regime change. But let's face it, all these income inequality issues that we've been talking about, and billionaires controlling things, this has been decades of a ramp up in the United States. And those people and our institutions have not managed to give people what they deserve, want, and need. Everyone in this country should have good wages. Education, of course, should be free, but it also should be a great education in all kinds of critical thinking and letting people go with things they really care about. And healthcare, of course. I mean, look at us now. It's a total mess. And one reason for that is because we are a country without healthcare for all. And, are these things going to happen? And then we have systemic racism, which inroads, must be made immediately, but again, very, very difficult. And then we have all these lunatics running around who think they're in some war movie and want to control the entire country. So I don't feel very optimistic now, but what I do feel optimistic now is all the people everywhere who do want to push this forward. And in terms of creative people, which is our people, we are so lucky that brilliant creative people are everywhere. There's so many great artists, and writers, thinkers, you can't get people to stop that. They do it against all odds because God knows, artists rarely can make a living on their work, but they're not going to stop showing us a different kind of world and showing us, maybe, and inspiring us to stand up for what we believe in too.
One thing that sort of inspires me, because over the years we've been to many, many art schools and talked to lots of art students, and actually academic universities have kept us alive for a long time because we really are kind of knowledge producers. Art students no longer, well, some of them do, but in general, art students don't necessarily want to jump into the sort of art market where you find your gallery, you find your collectors, you make expensive art, and you're set. That's a lottery that very few people can really win at. And the fact that art schools are producing hundreds of lottery, aspiring lottery winners, knowing there only one or two can win, is sort of a failure in education. Art schools should really educate artists to think creatively about a lot of things and to think past the art forum model of the art world. And a lot of students are rejecting that right now, and they really are thinking about how to use their creative thinking, their their skills, their ability with materials and thinking to make the world a better place rather than make themselves famous artists.
Which I think is a really kind of hopeful note for us to end on before we go into Q&A, that, we have a whole new generation of artists and rabble rousers that are entering into, a fractured and difficult economy, into a, difficult moment, if you will, but there's a lot of hope. There's more and more accountability than ever. There's more ways of reimagining what museums can be like and who they can be for. And I'm honestly very excited to be in the midst of all of this right now, because I'm hopeful that we can imagine a more inclusive and just future.
Absolutely. Could I just go one more place before, because I really wanted to tell this story about
Please.
we were at the Hirshhorn in 2018.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, it'll be really quick. I won't do the, so we need 22, and then I'll tell you when we should look at 23. So the great show from a few years ago, brand new, what was the rest of the title?
Commodity in the 1980s.
Okay, so I was the Guerrilla Girl who went down to the opening, and I had an hour or so to just go and see something in DC, and the Obama portraits had just been put up that day, and it was the opposite of Trump world. A huge diverse crowd lined up around the block to see the wonderful portraits, including me, of course. But when you got out of where the Obama portrait was, there was a room of all the presidents right before him. And I was shocked, absolutely gobsmacked, to see that the portrait of Bill Clinton had been painted by Chuck Close. Both of them are accused and pretty much known sexual harassers and sexual abusers. So it seemed you couldn't make this stuff up. So when we got back to our own places, started thinking about this, and can we see the next slide? And thinking about the dilemma of museums in the Me Too movement. So we did this poster, totally inspired by the Hirshhorn bringing us to DC. 3 ways to write a museum wall label when the artist is a sexual predator. And the funny thing about this is museums are trying to figure all this out, and there's a big debate about it now. So you can look at this online on our website, guerrillagirls.com, but the 3 ones are, for museums afraid of alienating billionaire trustees and collectors who donated the artist's work. And then for museums conflicted about disclosing an artist's abuse next to his art. And then our way of how we think it should be done. So take a look.
That's fantastic. And it's kind of exciting to be a little bit linked to that history that, stumbling upon that painting by Chuck Close and of Bill Clinton led you to make a new work.
And other times it's what we see.
Could I make a suggestion that we sort of close out with what we're doing next, which is an outgrowth of this poster we did about sexual predators? And it's a project that we're going to be doing in London. Looking around for a safe place to do it. It was going to be in the Somerset House, but it might be in Piccadilly Circus on a big lead board. It won't be exactly this, but this is a sort of teaser for it. And it's number 8. It's a short video, very short.
Historians call the macho, hetero, predominantly white male perspective in European and American art that depicts women as sexual objects.
Stop. Try to go back to the beginning. I don't know why. It's something I did probably. All right, let's see.
So
no, that's the other video.
It's number 8.
So the world of art.
It's right after the one, that 22 Productions, right next to it.
Number 8, yeah.
It just didn't start at the beginning. Okay.
What do art historians call the macho, hetero, predominantly white male perspective in European and American art that depicts women as sexual objects for the pleasure of male viewers. The male gaze. But the Guerrilla Girls call it the male graze. There are lots of naked women in post-colonial Western art. Sleeping in the backyard, splayed out on beds, lounging around with their friends, bathing, dancing, hooking up, being harassed, abducted, bound, raped, and murdered. When we looked into how some revered male artists used and abused women in their real lives, we saw more than gazing. We saw grazing. So the question we want to ask is, does life imitate art or art imitate life? Gauguin abandoned his wife and 5 children to become primitive in the Caribbean and South Pacific. He married a succession of teenage girls as young as 13. He died of syphilis at 55 and probably gave it to many of them. European colonialism at its finest. Of the women who had long-term relationships with Picasso, 2 died by suicide, 2 had nervous breakdowns, and 1 escaped and wrote about it. In 1950, sculptor Dorothy Daner decided her husband, sculptor David Smith, had hit her once too often. She loaded her pickup truck and took off for New York to start a career of her own. Smith turned around and married one of his young students. According to the book 9th Street Women, Hans Hofmann's summer school in Provincetown was a harem, and Hofmann, the bull elephant who patted his female students on the ass and fucked everything that moved. Lucian Freud admitted to having 14 children by 12 different women. He may have fathered twice as many. He said women go downhill at the age of 16. Sir Lawrence Gowing, principal of the slave school, pimped for Freud, admitting young girls to the art school who had caught Freud's eye. Chuck Close invited his female students from Yale to his studio to sit for portraits. The ones who refused to undress were given $100 and told to leave. The ones who stayed endured prying questions about their sex lives while posing naked. Get ready for the male graze, the Guerrilla Girls' take on our culture's enduring love affair with bad male behavior in art. We're preparing a new project for the courtyard of Somerset House for Art Night 2021. We hope to see you there. It just might change the way you think about art forever.
I'm so excited for that project. So why don't we get into Q&A? We have so many questions, and I'm already going to tell you, to our audience members, there's no way we can get to all of them, but I think that you should continue to mull them over and potentially, find a way to reach out to the Guerrilla Girls and see if they can answer them, and also look for some of the answers in their work. There's plenty to discover. So without further ado, I'm going to get to the first question, which I'm very curious about. How does it feel to have the very museums and galleries that you critique also display your work?
We touched on that before. In the beginning, we love being outsiders, and we still love being on the street the best. But museums have these audiences, these great audiences who really want to see what's there. And it's delicious to critique the museum right on its own walls. So although it did seem very strange and we had to do some soul searching because suddenly we were kind of accepted by the museums that we criticized, we felt we just had to try it out. And once we tried it out, we got so much response from people that it seemed really worthwhile.
That's great. And thank you for re-answering it. I know we addressed it at the beginning of the program. Okay, so our next question, how do you put intersectionality into practice within your group?
Well, that's a really good question. One of our very first posters, I think we have it somewhere, it's number 11, was done the year that we started. Only 4 commercial galleries in New York show show Black women, only one shows more than one. You know, it's something that we work at all the time, and we have members to remind us to do it. And if you look through our work, I believe you will see it there. We just did our Guerrilla Girls, The Art of Behaving Badly, and it's got a really interesting index. If you want to take a look at the work that we've done on issues of intersectionality, transphobia, all kinds of stuff. And we work hard at it, and I do believe we were very early honing in on those issues.
It's also interesting that the gallery that hit both of those points, Cabin Morris Gallery, also shows outsider art. So there's this like further intersection of like they're choosing to show artists that are expressly not included in the art world, and they're showing a more intersectional offering of artists, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, and this is from 1986.
And we have a sort of related question, kind of jumping off of this idea of intersectionality. Are there any women of color or trans women among the leadership of the Guerrilla Girls?
So the Guerrilla Girls are an interesting kind of group because at any one time we're small, so we're a small cell, and I wouldn't say, you know, the word leader is particularly important. But over the years, we've had over 60 members of the Guerrilla Girls, and we've been diverse in many, many ways. And of course, in terms of background, women of color, we've had trans members. We haven't had any men though, but other than that, we actually have been very diverse. And some of the campaigns we've done, of course, have been generated by all of these different people.
If I could say that over the last 5 years, 50% of our membership has been women of color.
That's great. Okay, how have you balanced your Guerrilla Girls work with developing your own individual artistic practice?
Oh,
it's so hard, I know.
It has been hard, but I think, you know, artists are trained to be crazy individuals. I mean, that's part of, you know, the education, which, you know, is maybe faulty, because collective work is really interesting, and I tend to think we, you know, most of us think of this as our artwork as well, and it's kind of wonderful to have a couple of different personas to shift back and forth and each one of us would answer that question in a different way. Some of our members, you know, did leave because they were too committed to their own individual work. And some of us really love to do collective work. So I think there are many answers to that question.
I think for me, I just love doing this work. So has it interfered with my own work? Hell yeah, it has. And I have no regrets about that at all. I mean, I've been lucky to be able to do both, but honestly, if I had to give up ever doing anything alone by my, you know, my work that's supposed to be, you know, the artist's work, I do it in a minute. I just love doing this work that's seen all over the world. There's always new technical things to deal with, new conceptual things, and new fights to get into and to try to get into them better.
So we have a lot of questions. This almost feels like a recruitment event. How do I become a Guerrilla Girl?
Oh, well, the bad news, it's really not possible. But the good news is you don't need to join us to do the kind of work that we do. You could use us as a model, find some, you know, kindred spirits, you know, invent your own crazy name and go after it. We really couldn't function on the level of letting everyone work with us who wanted to. It would just be crazy. And besides, the world needs more masked Avenger groups than just one.
And do you have a continuity plan for the future? I know that question's sort of related, like how do I become one, but how do you see keeping the Guerrilla Girls alive 5, 10, 50 years from now?
Cryogenics. I think.
Love it.
We will be frozen, and then we will appear in 100 years and have new issues to deal with. I hope new issues. I hope some of the ones from today will be a lot better, and we'll go at it again. But honestly, I don't know. That's really hard, you know, because we have new people all the time, and it's hard to know.
Well, I'm in upstate New York, so I'm going to sleep in the freezer tonight.
You mean just go outside? You can just go outside.
I think that the next question might be a good place for us to land on, and it also kind of piggybacks on this question. But how does a world where the Guerrilla Girls work is no longer needed look? Like, what would it take for you to hang up your masks and stop doing this work?
Oh my God, it's, you know, a couple of 100 years of feminism is not going to erase millennia of patriarchy. Yeah. You know, we'll always, you know, take a different form, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So I can't even imagine that. I don't think anyone who's worked in any kind of human rights work has ever thought that the problem will be completely solved.
Well, that's like both hopeful and not at the same time. But I think it's exciting. It's an exciting note to end on, that like we are going to continue to evolve, and looking at your practice, which is truly an evolution over 30 years, whether you're looking at the evolution of media or the evolution of social issues that you're taking on. Like, we are not perfect, we are human, and we will continue to change and grow and fight. So I want to thank both of you for joining us tonight. Kata and Frida, this has been such a treat. And I've learned even more than I thought I could just in the last hour, and I hope our audience enjoyed it. And I just want to give a quick thank you and shout out to Sarah for providing the ASL tonight, as well as Claire for providing the cart captioning to make this as more of an accessible event as possible. Truly, we want to reach as many audience members with the message that you have to share. So thank you. And I wish everyone a great night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.